Hey, everyone, and welcome back to Brothers of the Arcana. On this podcast, as always, I am Alex Aldea.
I am co-host Dave Ferrigno.
And today we have, today we have Karl Petry. Karl is a famous psychic. Do you mind my calling you a psychic, Karl, or do you have another word that you prefer?
No, psychic is fine.
Okay. So
that's what I'm known as.
That's what you're known as, exactly. So, Karl is a brother of ours in Freemasonry. He is well known in and about the apartments of the craft, but as well, he is extremely well known for his psychic abilities and being a medium. I want to ask you if those are the same thing or not. Some people, I guess, consider them different or activating or working different jobs, so to speak. Give us a little bit about your background and how you sort of discovered your gifts.
Well, I discovered when I was very, very young that I was able to do things that other people didn't. They didn't, when I would talk about these things, they thought there's something wrong with me. And what happened is that the more accurate you are as a child, the more you're susceptible to getting beat up.
Jeez.
And because people, when you know things that you feel is just everybody knows this, they feel like somebody told you this. And they say, well, who told you this? And I would say, well, nobody. And then they would say, well, we're going to beat it out of you. And so, I would constantly have problems, with my classmates and everything else. I'll give you an example.
Sure.
I was going to a public elementary school, and we were standing in line, getting ready to go to the wood shop. Mm-hmm. And I looked in the hallway, and there was a very attractive teacher, a female teacher, who taught home ec or home, how to cook and things like
that. Sure, home ec, home economics, absolutely.
Yep. And of course, there was the workshop that we were going to, the wood shop. Now, I was standing there, and I just looked at the shop teacher, and I looked at this teacher who was walking down the hallway, and I said, "Oh, they're dating." And everybody in the class, including the teacher, said, "What?" I says, well, they're dating. And they go, well, who told you that? I says, well, I thought everybody knew. They said, no, they're not dating. I don't know where you got your information from. They're not dating. Okay, 2 months later, they announced their engagement.
Completely unrelated, Karl. Completely unrelated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I recall, another incident is when my father came from Pennsylvania, and we were riding in the car, and this is way back in the 50s. Mm-hmm. And as we're riding in the car, I'm going to an area that I'd never been before. And so here I am, I'm looking out the window, and I say, oh, you used to play baseball here with Uncle Pete and Uncle John. And my father says, yes, we did. And then I looked and I says, your schoolhouse was on the top of the hill. He goes, yeah, it burned down years ago. I says, yeah. And I says, it was green. He goes, yeah, it was green. But see, what was weird, I'm telling him all this information in a place that I'd never been before, including the schoolhouse. That wasn't there anymore.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. But it went right over my parents' head. They just, like it was nothing.
Just assumed that you had found about it someplace else, or you heard about it from somebody or whatever it was.
Exactly. But this would go on constantly, in my life, being younger, and it would cause problems.
Wow.
Because you would just know things. Well, and, I said, it's caused a lot of problems.
I remember I contacted you a few years back because my friend and collaborator Kristen Murray her and I did a movie together, Actually, we did several movies together, but back in my acting days. And I know that she was on Absent Witness with you, at least on one of the series. And she loves you to freaking pieces, by the way. She couldn't say enough wonderful things about you, and I hope you feel the same about her, because I think she's a total sweetheart.
Oh, yeah.
But it was fun working with her. She's a total professional. But she was telling me she's, because she's kind of woo-woo out there like myself, getting the beads and all the stuff that we do. And she said, well, you should talk to Karl, about potentially doing a session or something like that. And then I contacted you and you said, I don't do sessions. And I know you mentioned that in the book. You don't do sessions because, well, what you started to say, you don't like having to give people bad news and or whatever the news may be, because you have no control over what that might be. And so how does it sort of manifest for you when you're doing that? Like, does it happen involuntarily? Can you control it? Or is it just enough to look at a person and already you're seeing stuff?
Well, usually I could just look at a person and I get a pretty good idea about their whole life, which is a problem. Because if I go to a party or a wedding or whatever, okay, I have to have my blockers on. Blockers is an exercise to block input from the people around me. Because I look at people, I know things about them, and it's it gets me very, very tired. And I don't want to know about your life. I don't want to know about your girlfriends, wives, or anything else. I don't want to know this, but it comes to me automatically. And, I'll give you an example. You're talking about Kristen
Mirai, right.
Right. I was looking at her and I said, you're from Central Pennsylvania. She said, yes, I am. And I said, there's railroad tracks all around your house. And she goes, yes, there's a big railroad track right in back of my house. I says, constantly hearing trains. I said, during the night. She said, yes. And I says, oh, okay. And then I started describing her house and everything else that goes with it. It's called remote viewing.
Right.
And I started doing that. And to me, it was just like, this is little, things that came into my mind. I'm talking about it. But then I have to realize how does she explain that I know everything about her house, where it's at, the trains, everything else? So after I was talking for a while, then I started looking at her face and I realized, well, Karl, you probably went too far, because you're talking about her house and where she slept and everything else. And I do that a lot. As a matter of fact, the publisher of my book, because, he's reading my book and everything, and he came to my house at Rosemary Ellen Guiley. She's a very famous author.
Okay.
She's written over 60 books. And he said, do you mind? I'm going to test you to see if you can remote view my house from a picture. And he held up a picture. He said, I was living near Washington, D.C. That's all I'm going to tell you. And this is where I lived. So I said, okay. So I looked at the picture, and I started telling him, well, you walk up the stairs to the front door. When you open the front door, if you look straight ahead, there's your living room. And I said, your father used to sit on the left, and he used to read a paper while you were eating. And then I would walk around the front floor, and I walked into the kitchen, and I said, wow, you have metal cabinets in there. He goes, metal cabinets. I said, metal cabinets. Back in the 50s, they had them in the 40s. I said, when you close the door, it goes chunk, 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 chunk. It has that metallic sound. He goes, I forgot all about them. I said, give me time. So I start going through the house, and then I said, your bedrooms are upstairs, right? He said, yes. So I walked up the stairs. I says, well, I'm in somebody's bedroom, and there's pennants that they use for like baseball teams and football teams. And I said, who's the one that's into sports? He goes, that's my brother. I go, boy, look at all these pennants on the wall. And he goes, I forgot all about those pennants. I says, and then I start reading them off.
So you're not seeing the modern day. You're seeing what at that time was happening.
Yes.
Interesting.
We're talking about 1960.
I see.
1959. So I'm going through the house, and after I went through the house, and he's confirming everything I said, then he said, all right, go out into the yard and tell me about my father's fence that he put up. I said, okay, give me a second. And I went outside, and I looked. I said, your father made a fence out of chicken wire and pipes, like, regular galvanized pipes. And I says, he tied them up, and that was your fence. And he goes, you're right. He goes, my father did that because we didn't have much money, and that's the cheapest fence he could put up. And then I says, wait a minute, there's a girl sitting to the left on a little porch. And I described her. He goes, well, that's my cousin. He goes, she used to come to my house all the time. And I described her. And then I went out of the yard, and I sat in a Plymouth station wagon. I said, I'm in a Plymouth station wagon in the back seat. And I said, there's an older lady sitting up in the front, and your mother's in the back seat. He goes, that's my grandmother. We used to go out on rides on Sunday. So all of a sudden, there was no question about it, what I could do. Now, the thing is, when you think about it, it's a useless thing to have this ability. Who cares? It doesn't put money in your pocket. It doesn't do anything. It's a stupid, when you think about it, it's really a stupid thing to be able to do that.
Well,
but I'm able to do it.
But if you could tell people about their past, but can you tell them about their present or their future?
Present, yes. Future, no. I can't.
So why not the future?
I just can't. I cannot do it.
Do you
present? I can tell present.
Understood. So the interesting part is the present immediately becomes the past, right? Because we go from present to present moment, everything, if you want to think of it in terms of the way the universe works, right? But the future is unwritten, so to speak, so it's malleable. Because some psychics can tell the future. I don't know if you believe that or if you think that that's just hokum or...
I've known one person that could do that.
Really?
One person.
Are they still practicing?
Yes. It's the English psychic, Paula Roberts. We're very good friends. And occasionally when we're asked to do an investigation and we work on the thing together, I could see her and I see how she works with the future.
Maybe we could get her contact info from you. We'd love to have her on the show. That'd be a lot of fun.
We could probably do something like that. She's really, really good.
Oh, I'm sure she's amazing.
She is, and I have high respect for her. And that's kind of rare because I don't have psychic friends except her.
Well, you got Brian Bowden.
Well, I'm just saying is that for the most part, I don't hang around with them.
Sure, I get it.
Because when I do things, I never charge. And a lot of these people do, or most everybody does.
So are you willing to do a session if you don't charge for it?
No.
Oh, okay.
Because what happens is in the past, people are freaked out. Because, see, when I start to talk, I just keep talking. And it's like I don't put my brakes on, and I just keep going.
Got it.
And what happens is that it really starts to freak people out. And they said, well, I didn't want you to talk about that. Well, I don't know these things. You asked me to do something, and I didn't. What I have is, the word for it is retrocognition. It's very, very rare. Only a few people have it. In the Encyclopedia of Ghosts and Spirits, they talk about people like Houdini and all that. It's an encyclopedia with a lot of famous people in it. And luckily, I'm in it too. So it has a picture of me, and it gives the date that I was born. And where I died is left blank. And it says, Karl has the ability to see things in the past in great detail. And it's called retrocognition. And it's very, very rare. And then if you look up, that's when you look up my name, that's what you read. Then if you go further into the encyclopedia and you look up retrocognition, it says, see Karl Petry.
So how would you differentiate yourself? Number one, so mediums talk to dead people, right? Isn't that kind of the idea of mediums? So do you do that as well?
Not on demand. Occasionally it comes up. The people who I would have liked to have talked to, they have not contacted me, and I have been unable to contact them. People I barely know will come to me, and I'll talk to me. Like with the passing of my parents, they never came back to me. Yet my wife's mother, who passed, she came back to me.
Your mother-in-law. And she's haunting you.
My mother. Anytime she wants to, she's a wonderful, wonderful person.
Oh, I'm sure.
So,
I'm sure.
We got along great, and she's fantastic. And she came back, but yet my wife's father never came back. It's so, it's just very weird the way that works. And when I was having problems, when you read my book, you would see that I was somewhat going crazy, having this ability.
Yeah.
And I had nobody to talk to. I went to a psychologist, and I figured, well, maybe they can help me. So I went there, and I had an appointment with the man, and I sat down in his living room, and I said, let me explain to you what my situation is. I said, I go somewhere, and I see the way it was before in great detail. And I says, it's kind of troubling because sometimes in my mind, I see the past and the present, it all gets mixed up. And I says, but I see it in great detail. Well, he looked at me and he said, what kind of insurance do you have?
He was like, this is going to take a while.
Well, then, I said, don't worry about the insurance. I can take care of that. And then so I went on about instances that happened. I looked around this house and he said, want me to tell you where your house was built and what it looked like? And I told him, and he looked at me, and his wife was there. She's also a doctor, and she's looking at each other, and she goes she nods her head, and that's true. It was that way. And then he said, I think we could work out sessions about, back the payment. And then he looks at me, he goes, how'd you get along with your father and mother? I realized I was wasting my time. But to make a long story short, I was finally directed to a priest of all things. And I was in Summit.
Not Father Pacantrera.
That was Father Morris. And I spoke to him over the phone. And he handles people who have these abilities or have, paranormal abilities. So it was going to be, I think it was a Saturday. And I said, I'll meet you at 12 o'clock. It was the Summit. So I went to Summit and parked my vehicle and started walking towards this building. It's like where the priests hang out and the nuns or whatever, a rectory, I think you call it. So I went to this rectory and I opened the door and I could hear young people like running around on the second floor. So I walked up the stairs, and as I walked to the top of the stairs, I looked straight ahead, and way at the end of the hallway was a desk with a priest sitting in it. And I figured, well, I'll ask him to see where Father Morris is. So I start walking down the hallway, and I see this priest like pushing back in his seat. And as soon as I walked up to the doorway, he goes, "You're Karl Petry." I said, "Yes, I am." He goes, "I knew the minute you walked into the building."
Did he feel your energy, or how did he?
He felt, he says, I knew the minute you came into the building. And so he's staring at me, and I said to him what I said to the psychologist about being able to see these things. And then I said, "Oh, by the way, want me to tell you how this room looked before?" And I said, "There was a window here." And I started going through. He goes, "That's true. That was all changed about 10 years ago." And I said, "And the color?" And I told him about the color of the room. He goes, "Yeah, about 10 years ago, we changed all that." And then he looked at me and he said, "You're beyond anything we could do. We can't help you at all here. You're way beyond that." So he sent me to the Parapsychology Foundation in New York City. So I went there. And it was really great because I walked into the place and I went up to the woman in charge, Dr. McMahon, it was her name. And I started telling her about these things I was able to do. And she very calmly, she said, "Oh, that's psychometry."
Psychometry? Okay.
Yeah, psychometry. When I'm able to touch items, I could tell you who they belong to or how.
Oh, it's a kinesthetic sense.
Ah, okay.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
So I could touch these things. And then I started telling about some other things. Like I said, I could sit in my room and I could go to different places and see what's going on. She goes, "Oh, that's remote viewing." So I says, "Okay." So it was great because I could go someplace that they didn't think I was nuts, and they weren't asking me what kind of insurance company I have. So, so that was going well.
So you've got psychometry, you've got remote viewing, you've got being a medium that people come to. You've got this past
Retrocognition.
right. So that's 4 things. Anything else on the menu?
Well, that's enough.
Well, it'd be enough for anybody, wouldn't it? Yeah, sure.
Certainly enough modalities.
So I said to her, we were just talking, and I said that, my ability, I said, I sometimes could look at a photograph, go into the photograph, turn around, and I could tell you who took the picture.
Oh, cool.
That's pretty neat.
"You can do that?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Would you be willing to come to my house and try it there?" I said, "Yeah, sure. That'll be fine with me." So she lived in South Orange, which is not too far from Jersey City, Newark. It's, about maybe 8 miles from my house. So we made a time and a date, whatever. So I went to her house, and in her dining room, she had all of these photographs, family photographs that were there. She had at least 30 of them. And she goes, "Take a look at these pictures, see what you could do with them." And I looked at the pictures, and I grabbed with my hand. I took a picture of 2 women standing in the yard, one with an apron and one without. And I said, "I'll tell you everything about this." She goes, "Go ahead." I said, "Okay, this picture was taken during World War II." I said, "The woman with the apron, she has a roast in the oven, which she saved with her ration coupons. And she was afraid that this guy taking the pictures was so slow that she was going to burn the roast that was cooking in the kitchen."
Wow.
And I said, and the guy was really taking a long time to shoot the picture. And she says, "And what did that guy look like?" And I said that he's wearing a blue suit, a blue tie. He's wearing a jacket. Looks like he just came out of church. And I said, "The problem is he's holding," and I went with my hands like this. And I says he's having a hard time trying to hold the camera to hit the shutter. She goes, "Okay." And I says, "And that's how the picture was taken." She goes, "Okay, you could go." So I left. Now, the woman that was in there with the apron was her aunt, her mother's sister. The other woman was her mother who passed away. As soon as I left, she got on the phone and she called her aunt. And she said, "Do you remember that picture that you gave me that you took in the yard on Magazine Street when you used to live?" She goes, "Oh, yes, I'll never forget that." She goes, "Why?" She goes, "That was taken during the war. And I had to collect all of my ration coupons to buy a piece of meat." And she said, "It was after church and we were going to have dinner there and use this meat." She goes, "And your Uncle Stosh wanted to take pictures. So he said to us to go out in the yard to take the pictures. But," she said, he had such a hard time because he had polio. That's why he wasn't in the military."
Wow. Okay, that makes sense. That's why he had such a tough time holding the camera. Got it.
Exactly. She said he had polio, couldn't take the picture. She says, but he finally took it, and I ran into the house, and I saved the roast. So she says, "Why are you asking?" She goes, well, it's a long story. I'll explain to you when I see you next time. And that gives you an example.
Now, these were early in time. So when did you decide that you were going to stop giving sessions? Because obviously you were giving them at that point, right? So you were perfectly willing to look at you're willing to look at a picture or something like that and do that kind of thing.
Because this was an old photograph, and it's not a, how can I put it? It wasn't something like it's there to show my abilities. It wasn't there to help her or her family or anything else. It was just a way of expressing what I could do. And so, because she wanted to know, can you really do that? And I said, yes.
So you currently right now, you got your blockers on, I'm guessing.
Yes, I do.
Okay. So if you look at me or you look at Dave, you're not seeing anything in particular.
I won't do that. I will not do that.
I know. I'm saying.
And I'll tell you.
I'm saying yes.
And I'll tell you why. There's a reason for it. A few times I went ahead and I did it. And I would be, let's say, at a Masonic lodge or whatever, and I would be doing a presentation. And in the early days, somebody would say, what do you see about me? And I would tell them, and everything was going well. They would say, you're accurate. Everything you're saying is true. And then there was a woman, and she said, what can you see about me? And I says, okay. And I started telling her, and she goes, no, that's not right. I told her some more. She goes, oh, no, that's not true. That's not true. And I'm there like, this is weird. This is very, I know that it's real. I know it's accurate. And I don't know why she's saying it. So now everybody there is looking at each other like, well, I guess Karl's not what he's cracked up to be. And so I felt really bad. I apologized. I said, I'm sorry. I says, I'm seeing something. I says, obviously I'm wrong. So after the whole thing was over, this woman walks up to me and she said, by the way, she said, everything you said was true. But she said, I was kind of embarrassed in front of all these people that if I said what you're saying is true, I'd feel kind of embarrassed. I said, so what you do is you threw me under the bus.
Yeah.
She
discredited you. Right.
And I said, well, I have to thank you. And she says, why? I said, because of you, I will never, ever do this again.
Oh, Karl. But yeah, I mean, I'm
so
I
screwed it up for everyone.
I get it. But, a lot of people could benefit. You know that, right?
That, I learned my lesson. I don't charge for this.
No, I know you don't.
To me,
I know you don't.
And so I go out there and I'm trying to be nice.
Right.
And most people say, thank you for telling me this. And everything works out fine, except that all it takes is one person like that. And it's like, you taught me a lesson. I will never, ever do that again. All right.
Look, we would never ask you to violate your own personal ethics on it, obviously. But I would ask you at some point to maybe reconsider the fact that, one bad apple shouldn't ruin it for everybody in terms of like you.
What did it with me?
Well, that's what I'm saying. But you have such a beautiful gift that, to keep it from the world because of one person, it's unfortunate.
Well, yeah. And some people just don't want to know the truth, right?
Well, it's
like they're afraid to know it.
They don't want to hear it. And if you tell them something, like, I went on a murder case once. It was referred to the Parapsychology Foundation. And I went there with Dr. McMahon. She's a parapsychologist. And we went to, I think it was Totowa. We went to Totowa, and she said, my brother was killed. He was murdered. And I said, and I looked at her and I said, I see a hand on a door handle of a Lincoln Continental, a black one. I says, why am I seeing that? She goes, my brother was a chauffeur and he drove around with a Lincoln Continental. And then I said, oh, he listens to 1010 Wins because I hear it on the radio. She goes, that's all he listened to. And so I'm going on to all these details. Now, Dr. McMahon is right next to me. She's listening to this whole thing. And I said that he stopped for a cup of coffee. Now, I knew no details about this. I said he pulled into a parking lot right near, right off of Route 3. And I said he went in there for a cup of coffee, and the place was being held up, and the guy turned around with a gun, and he shot him.
Oh,
he thought
Jesus.
He was a detective. And I says he was killed on the spot.
Horrible.
And so she's listening to this, and after she listened to it, I said, do you want to know who killed him? She goes, well, the police got this guy. I says, so what I see, I said, he's a Hispanic guy who lives in Patterson on the second floor of a bodega. She goes, that's exactly where they found him. She goes, now, was it a contract hit or what? I says, no, it's a random act of violence. He just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and that's how he got shot. And she said, you don't think it was a mob hit or anything? I says, no, absolutely not. She goes, well, you just tell me the same thing that the police are telling me. I says, the police are right. She was so upset that she wanted this to be a mob hit. She was upset. And remember, I don't charge for this.
Right.
I'm there with somebody. I'm doing this whole thing, and it's not costing her a cent. And I'm just telling her all this. And she knew I knew nothing about the murder, nothing. And I gave her all this information, details about him and his life. I went through the whole thing. And they were so upset. His sister and his mother were so upset that they wouldn't even walk us to the door. They were sort of like, they kicked us out of their house.
Carl, I think I found out what the problem is here. Don't ever give sessions to women. And then you're going to be okay.
I've done it, with other families, whatever, that I was asked through the foundation to go out and do this.
Yeah.
And so I would go out for the foundation and do it. And, it solved. I mean, most of the time it was very productive. Everything worked out really well. And no complaints. Everything worked out well.
So let's talk a little bit about your journey towards sort of recognition, because obviously you've worked with Ingo Swann, you've worked with Paula Roberts,
yes,
you worked with a bunch of other folks of note. So can you walk us through kind of how you started to get recognized? And, you ended up with a TV show, you ended up with a couple of books under your belt, and obviously a new one coming out, which I want to talk about. But yeah.
Right. Okay, so they had this, like a get-together. The people from the Parapsychology Foundation, some of the workers there, and one of the local colleges that was teaching parapsychology. Mm-hmm. And what they would do is they would invite everybody over, and it was like a couch that was like a round type of couch. And they would have like a idol, like an idol from Hawaii, whatever. It was like a little...
like a tiki, yeah.
Yeah, like a tiki thing. And so what would happen is that this tiki would be handed from one person to the other, and that person would talk about the things that they were doing, things in their life that was troubling or what they were trying to do. And so it would go on from person to person. Now, in that room, not sitting at that couch, was Paula Roberts, the English psychic, and she was sitting in the kitchen watching this whole thing. And they hand me this tiki thing, and so I start saying that, I have this ability, and I says, it's crippling me because I can't sleep. I have problems, even negotiating during the day because I'm so tired. There's so much going on. And so I said the whole thing, and then the woman that was running it, she was a professor at one of the universities. She goes, next. And I handed it to the next person. And then they were talking about, teaching a course in college or whatever. And I just laid out my whole heart in front of these people. So then we took a break. And at this apartment house that we were on overlooks 42nd Street in Manhattan, right near Times Square. So as I get up and I'm kind of down about this whole thing, Paula Roberts comes up to me, and with her English accent, she says, "Pearl before swine." And I look at it because she's, "Pearls before swine."
She's right.
And I said, "Why are you saying that?" She goes, "You told them such incredible things." She goes, "But," she says, "they didn't understand it. They went on to something else." Right. She goes, this is ridiculous. She goes, you don't deserve to be here. So, we became friends because she realized what was going on. And then I got a phone call probably a couple days later. And she said, Ingo Swan wants to meet you.
Okay.
Now, Ingo Swan is like a recluse. He worked with the government and all this, remote viewing, psychic spying and all that.
Wasn't he part of that Men with Goats thing?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay.
I could tell you great stories about that.
Yeah.
And
well, we'd love to hear him.
We'd love to hear him.
So he goes ahead and she says he wants to meet you. She says, and I will go with you to his building. He's also an artist, and his artist studio is in the basement. So I never met this guy, don't know who he is, except that, from reputation. So we go to this great big, huge building, and we open the door and we start walking down the stairs into his studio. And I look, the total room is dark. It's super dark. There's one, looks like a 15 or 20 watt light bulb on a chain above a big table. And all I see is a nose, a beard, and a tiny little cigar in his mouth. And the shade was made out of crumpled aluminum foil. And so I see this mouth and nose. I didn't see his eyes.
Did you think you were being interrogated or something, like Soviet style?
Yeah, I just thought it was kind of, I don't know what.
Did you put on your tinfoil hat?
Yeah, so I go there, and he goes, I heard about you.
Woo!
He goes, look around here. What was this place before it was my studio? So I looked around and I said, this was a factory. I said, they used some sort of wire here. And I said, at the foot of the stairs, and I described a man who was by a machine. I said, and that's who I see at the foot of the stairs. Now, Paula Roberts can't see this stuff. And Ingo's just looking at me, and he's still puffing on this little cigar. And he says to me, I see him too. I believe his name was Frankie. Okay, we're on good, So I'm on the
same wavelength here. Yeah.
Yeah, same thing. So, and then we're talking there for a while, and things are going really well, and we became pretty good friends because when I would hit the nail on the head about certain things, he would never say you're right. He would just stare into my eyes and take a puff on a cigar.
So if he agreed with you, you were good.
So that was it. I was man of few words.
Man of few words. Yeah.
So everything was working out well. And as time went on, we became closer. And I said to him, I have a real problem. I says, everywhere I go, I see things from the past. And I says, it's hard for me to sleep. There's some cities like Philadelphia, I have a real problem because in my job, I was constantly moving. Everywhere, every single day, I would have a different location. So for me, when I had to go to Philadelphia, it was a problem. So
why Philly specifically?
There's something about different parts of Philadelphia that when I go there, I see images very, very clear from the 1700s.
Ooh.
And I'm not talking about, the guns, the fife and all this, the Minutemen and all that. No, none of that. I see the way the houses were back in the 1700s. And it looked like a living dump. It was horrible. There were livestock around the streets. It smelled. Everybody was filthy and dirty. The houses, everything looked like it needed paint. It was... don't think it's like Hollywood. When Hollywood shows you the old days, it's pristine, it's clean. Throw that right out of your head. It wasn't that way. It was dirty, filthy. Like I said, chickens and horses pooping all over the streets. Well, that's the way it really was.
Sounds like Dave's apartment.
I see it there.
Right.
Exactly.
So, with that in mind, whatever, he taught me a technique for blocking it.
Okay.
Which is kind of involved. So it'd be too long for me to get into that right here. But he expressed to me how I can do it. And I did. And that's why, like during the day, automatically I have blinders on.
How long does it, I mean, you don't have to describe it, but how long does it take to put on? In other words, how long do you have to take to activate this thing?
I can do it almost instantly.
Now, like you're used to it. Yeah.
Yes, but
and then can you turn that off instantly as well?
No, if I get tired, it starts to break down.
Got it.
And then everything starts to come through. What I used to do is I used to take drinks. I almost became an alcoholic. I used to take drinks to sort of like let it go away. And it would do it for a couple hours. But then the drinking resulted in more images coming in faster.
Oh, interesting. Because you would think the alcohol would depress the psychic ability on some level. That's sort of why a lot of the government, stuff they say, well, drinking's fine, but don't go do mushrooms. Don't go do other stuff that would increase your psychic ability, so to speak. So, yeah. So I had a question about what, obviously you were born with this talent or you came to it pretty early on. I'm guessing. Yes. But there are people that say, number one, everybody can develop some level of talent, and there's maybe not the same kind of talents, but their own particular flavor, so to speak, whatever. It's just about tapping into that ability and growing it sort of like a muscle in essence. Do you believe that that's the case? Could anybody develop psychic abilities? And if so, how would they go about wanting to do that for themselves?
See, I don't believe that.
Oh, okay.
I believe that if you have some abilities, you could probably make it stronger. But if you don't have any abilities at all, no matter what you do, it's not going to work.
That's interesting.
And yes, so people will say, I'm setting a course and I can make you a remote viewer. And no, that's not going to work.
Interesting.
And, when I was tested by the CIA, my abilities, which worked out really well, they were very not surprised because Ingo said that, to meet this guy, Karl. But the thing is that they're very selective of who they use. And I didn't do things quite the way they wanted me to. They gave me longitude and latitude. And I said, what's there? And so when they gave me that and I told them what I saw, then he asked that famous question, did you get all that information from the longitude and latitude? I said, absolutely not. I have a problem with numbers. You said longitude, you might as well go blah, 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 blah. I said, it made no difference at all. But I got what they call a target. I got the target right. Down to the finest detail.
Now, did you do that through some level of vibration? In other words, what are you tapping into? Because you couldn't use the longitude and latitude. So how did you find your way there?
Maybe the guy that I spoke to, maybe he had it in his mind.
And you tapped into that. I see.
Right. And so, but the thing is, I go into detail that is greater than anybody could hold in their mind. So, with stuff like that, it's kind of freaky in a way that I can do that. And I've done that with family members or whatever. I don't announce it. I just do it. And everything works out fine as long as I don't tell them the information I got was strictly through my abilities. Because even my family, even my brother does not believe anything. His thing is, if I don't have it, Karl doesn't have it. That's the way he looks at it.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah. So, and no matter what people come up to him and they talk about me and they talk about the books and everything else, his thing is, I don't believe it. I don't believe it because I don't have it. And that's the way a lot of people are. And so you go out there and do things and it's kind of crazy. And but then again, there's a lot of positive things that I'm able to do. There's a mayor of a city in New Jersey who heard about my abilities, And working with two former FBI agents, they asked to solve a cold case from 1972.
Wow.
So they notified me, would I be interested in working with them?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I would. They said that Hulu and CBS is going to do a TV special about this missing person, and they would like my input on it. I said, okay. It was a young girl who got brutally raped by a number of men, and then she was killed. And then her body was discarded. So I'm there like, I don't know who this girl is. You just told me it's 1972. I don't want any more information. I will tell you. So I'm sitting there, and they have a TV camera on me. And so we're in this room, the guy's asking me questions. So I'm answering the questions. And then I said that where they threw her body, I see a lot of stones, a lot of rocks and stones. And then I laid on the floor and I raised up my arm. And I said her body was found with her right arm sticking up in the air. And everybody's looking at each other. And they said, okay, we'll tell you, her body was found in a rock quarry, and the way you described her body was exactly the way we saw it, with her arms sticking up like that. And so after they told me all this, they said, well, we were told that she was part of a satanic group, and that she joined this group, and I said, well, stop right there. She was not part of any satanic group. That's ridiculous. She go, but her sister belonged to it. I says, I don't care about her sister. She was not a part of that. Well, Hulu's going on. I says, Hulu better not do it. It's a lie. Mm-hmm. And if Hulu goes with this, I'm going to make it known that they're just guessing at this stuff, and they're running this girl's reputation down to the ground
to try to make sensationalism out of it. Sure.
You got it. That's what they were trying to do. And I said, don't you dare do that. And then they're asking more and more questions. And I said, want me to tell you who did it? I'll tell you who killed her. And they looked at me, and I said, it was a policeman. I thought they were going to drop on the floor. Their prime suspect was a policeman.
Wow.
And all the evidence that they collected in 1972 that they put into the storage room, when they went to check it out, it was all disappeared. There was no evidence about her anymore.
Wow.
So they couldn't get any DNA or nothing like that. Everything was gone. And then I said to him, and then I remote viewed where the guy lived. And I said that I'm not quite sure of the town that he's in, but I'll describe the room that he's sitting in. And I said, the guy's a gun fanatic. And they said, yes, he is. And I started describing how he handles the gun and all this. And they said, well, the suspect that we think, that you're talking about, he is a gun fanatic and he lives in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And so they gave the information to Hulu, and Hulu, they packed up their trucks and they're gone. They never did the show.
What?
Because I said, don't you dare. Yep, they did not do the show. They said, this guy ruined it. You were going to have this whole thing about devil worship and all this. And there was a book that was written about this, which I didn't know. And then while they were at it, they said, how did she leave to go to this house? I said, well, a car pulled up. And I said, there were two young guys in it. And they persuaded her to go into the car. Mm-hmm. And they drove down Route 22, which is a western roadway that goes through New Jersey. Yeah. And
through Union and a couple of other places.
Yeah. Right. Scotch Plains. And so I tell him all this.
Plainfield.
And I said that the car, I described the car because I'm into cars. And I gave the color of it. The car that I thought it was like, I could only see like the hood portion of it. And I told them what it was. And they said, you just described the car that the suspect's friend had. And then they brought a whole bunch of photographs at me, and they said, take a look at these photographs, see if anybody pops up. So I'm going through page after page, and then I pulled one out, and I was going through more pages, pulled the other one out, and I said, okay, this man's the driver, this is the passenger. And they said, got that right. And then they had one guy who claimed that he was there when this rape happened and the murder. And they asked me about the house, where it was at. And I said, I don't know the area. I said, but the house was painted green. So if the house at that time was painted green, I don't know what it is now, but back then it was green. So once again, the FBI guys are looking at each other, and they said, the one suspect that we had that was involved with this, he said that all he knows is that they took him through this back road, and they took him to a two and a half story house. And all I can tell you is the house was painted green.
Wow.
And so the FBI guys and the mayor of this particular town were very impressed, but I put the kibosh to Hulu and CBS. They would not go through with it.
So what's the afterlife look like?
Well, there is an afterlife.
There is. You can confirm that.
Yeah.
You heard it here, folks.
And the reason for it is that when dealing with entities, from the other side, that they tell me things about their lives, whatever, that are checked out, that are accurate. So the thing is, if there was no life after death, how would I have that information? Well, these people have passed, and they're telling me this stuff.
They talk about Akashic records and stuff, right? So there's places that you can tap into certain information and other things like that. You buying that? Is that kind of where you get your info sometimes?
I don't know that much about it, but my thing is very, very basic. And there's just one thing when the Parapsychology Foundation, let me go back to that for a moment. It's a library, and they have all this information about abilities, this and that. And so the director said, we don't see you reading the books. I said, I won't read the books. And they go, why? I said, because if I read the books, I'm going to listen to what they're saying, and it's going to alter the way I do things. Like maybe I'm doing it wrong, and they're telling me to do it a certain way. So what I'm going to do is I am not going to do it their way. I am not going to read any books of how they do it or anything like that, because it could hurt my abilities. And it's like when different universities used to send over people, like from UCLA and the University of Maryland and all that, they used to come to see me because they wanted to test me. I was tested many, many, many times. And they would see what tests they could do to see how accurate I could do things. So we used to meet at the Parapsychology Foundation on the second floor, and we would sit at a table, and they would bring me things like jewelry, a watch, a book or whatever. Then they would tell me, well, what can you tell me about this? And then I would take the books or the objects, and I would tell them who owned it.
Okay.
Things like that. They were very, very happy about that. And so I was always, like I said, always being tested by usually universities. Some people from Princeton, too, came down, but they can't say they're from Princeton. They're not allowed to say that. I know they're from Princeton. And the reason for that is that people who donate money to Princeton, if they found out that they were doing any paranormal research, would withdraw their funding because they figure it's frivolous, it's a waste of money. So as long as the colleges or the university is doing it, we are not going to participate by giving them money to waste money on that.
Okay.
It's weird, but that's just the way it is. And I was told that by a director there.
So when you describe these entities you're seeing, are they people that have passed, or is there anything else you've encountered entity-wise?
People that are passed. And I would they would tell me things, and I would go to the living and tell them things, especially like missing money, missing objects that they're looking for, and I'll tell them where to look for it. It happened in my own family.
If you see any missing money for either of us, you let us know, please. Okay.
I'll let you know.
Yeah.
It was strange when my wife's mother passed away. Her son was going out with this woman, and she was kind of strange, a very aggressive type of woman. And after my wife's mother died, my mother-in-law died, what she did is she, on her own, decided what funeral parlor she wanted her to be, where the wake was going to be, and what kind of dress she should wear. She had a key for her apartment, and she went in there. She picked out the clothes that she wanted her to be laid out in. And so, as everybody was grieving, this one was going behind the scenes doing this. And what happened is that finally her husband said, okay, we're going to contact the hospital. We're going to tell the funeral parlor what funeral parlor is going to pick up the body. So when he started making phone calls, they said, the body's gone. It was picked up. He said, what do you mean the body's gone? I didn't tell anybody what to do with the body. They go, oh, no, the body's gone. And so we started making all kinds of phone calls and found out what happened, that this woman went ahead and she took the body, she got the everything else. So we now had to take that body out of that funeral parlor to another funeral parlor where it's supposed to be. And also the clothing that we figured that she should actually be wearing. So you could see the kind of tension that was going on in the family at the time. So what happened is that my wife's mother, she saved half dollars, Kennedy half dollars. She had a big, huge bag full of Kennedy half dollars. And so her husband said, the bag of coins is missing. It's gone. So they're all looking at this chick who went and took the body and did the deeds with the clothes and everything. And they said, it looks like she came in here. She had the key, and she was she just took the money. She saw the money. She took off with it. So everybody's thinking she took off with the money. So the worst of times, getting ready to go to a wake, working with the funeral parlor and the cemetery and all this, and now we have a theft of money. So, everybody's pointing fingers at this woman, saying that she did it, all this. So I went to sleep that night, and all of a sudden, my wife's mother showed up, and she went with her finger like this to her mouth. Like, don't say anything. She said, and she took my mind to her apartment. She opened up the closet, took her finger, and she went to the steam pipe. And she went to the top of the steam pipe, and she rolled her fingers down to the floor. And when she pointed to the floor, she just went like this. She was gone. So the next morning when I woke up, I said to my wife, I said, call your father, tell him to go into the bedroom, open up the closet, follow the steam pipe down to the floor, and tell me what he sees. She says, okay. So she called him, and while she was on the phone, he went into the closet, opened up the door, looked at the steam pipe, went to the floor, and there was a bag of money.
Wow.
Wow.
So it wasn't the busybody woman that took it.
Nope, he did not take the money. But yet, everybody accused her of it, and it was a bad scene that was going on in the house, and it was terrible. But it goes to show you that here she is on another plane. She's not with us, yet she came back seeing the kind of problems that we were having and the hard feelings and everything, and she remedied the thing through me. She showed me where the money was. And this has happened not just once, it's happened a number of times within the family, things like that.
But Karl, you have So you saw entities, and I just want to follow up on Dave's question briefly, and I know he's got more questions after that. But other than people that have passed on, have you seen other entities, angels, demons, any kind of fae, any other sort of things?
Yes, the most scariest thing was shadow people.
Okay.
You ever hear shadow?
Brian Bowden talked a little bit about it, but I would love to hear more about that. What is that about? What's that all about?
Yeah.
Well,
what's your take on shadow people?
There is a storage facility located off of Route 46, and Jason Vigorito, his father and his uncle, they rented a little cubicle in his storage facility. And what they used to do is take apart antennas and electronic gear for the gold. It has gold inside and silver. And so they used to take all this stuff and break it apart and save the precious metals. That's what their job was.
Okay.
And the uncle was in his cubicle doing his work, and he saw this black shadow figure coming towards him. He never saw anything like that in his life. He got really scared, and he started screaming because this thing was coming towards him. And that was it. He was afraid to go back to the facility. It took him a while to go back, but when he did, he brought crucifixes, pictures of Jesus, pictures of Mary, and he stuck it all on the walls, because he was terrified of it.
Okay.
And, so he told Jason about it. He goes, I won't be there alone. I will not go there alone anymore. And he says that I am terrified of this thing. And other people who had spaces in this facility claimed the same thing. They would see these shadows moving around. So I was in contact with Rosemary Ellen Guiley. She's an investigator, well known. And she said, could we go there, get permission? We'll go with audio recorders, still cameras, and video. And let's see it there. So Jason contacted the owner of the place, and he said, we're doing some research and we would like to go there at night with cameras and audio recorders to see if we could find anything in this place. And the guy said, he said, okay, you can go. So here we are. There was actually 4 of us that hopped in my chrome horse, and we went over to this place to do this investigation. So there's a lock on the door where you push the buttons in, like the numbers, and you could open up the door. So we got there. Jason had the number, and he punched it in. The door was closed. It's locked. He did it again. It wouldn't open. So he calls his father, and he says, is this the number that you used to get into the place? He goes, that's the number. He goes, it's not opening. So he calls his uncle, and he goes, who had a different number? He said, what number do you use to get into this place? And he gave Jason the number. Jason goes there, does it again. The door remains locked. It will not let us in.
They didn't want you there.
Now, it was annoying because Rosemary Guiley drove up from Maryland to do this thing, and it's not opening the door. So we got kind of discussed it with everyone. We said, we'll come back the following day.
Right.
And we'll try it again. So it was going to be at nighttime when we were going. So Jason, during the day, he drives to this place, walks up to the door, hits the numbers that we used the day before, and whammo, the door opens up. So he goes, okay, maybe there's something wrong with the lock. We'll try it again. We went there that night, and all of us, once again, we go there, park the vehicle, get all our equipment out. Jason goes up there, hits the numbers. It will not open the door.
Wow.
His uncle's, it will not open the door. So we're standing around that door, and what's strange is all the people who have things in that place, nobody came by to get into the place. Like, no, we could have walked in with somebody else. Not one person while we were there had to go see the place. So we're standing there and we're looking, the office is right next to the door. And there are 4 monitors that's like on top of the desk. And we're looking at the monitors and it shows all of us at the front door. And so, like we're waving at it, whatever, because we're disgusted because we can't get in. We waited there for a while and we said, it's not going to let us in. So we left. So the next day, I went with Jason to meet the guy who owns the place. And we wanted to tell him our tale of woe that we could not get into the place. The guy was from the Middle East. His wife was there. And I don't know if it's like crocheting or whatever. She was working with some cloth. And we walked in and we said, we tried to get into the place last night. It wouldn't let us in. The woman and her kids, they looked at Jason and I that we walked in saying this. She grabbed her stuff and she ran out the door. Now, that should have been a dead giveaway. There's something wrong, so.
Literally and figuratively.
Then the guy is looking at me and he says, I don't understand why that happened. I don't understand. I says, we were there last night. I says, you go look at your security cameras, you could see it. I said, you have the 4 security cameras. All of them are looking at us at the front door. So he goes, that's impossible. I go, oh, no, we're all there. And each one of the monitors showed us at the front door. He goes, that's impossible. I says, well, why is it impossible? He goes, follow me. So we went outside. He goes to one end of the building. He goes, there's one camera. He walks to the other side of the building. He goes, there's your second camera.
Right.
He walks to the building near Route 46. He goes, there's your third, and there's your fourth. He goes, there are 4 cameras on each side of the building. And I'm looking at Jason. Jason's looking at me, and it's like, we were there. We saw all 4 cameras on us. So I said, thank you very much. And I said, I will never, ever try to investigate shadow people again. Because any kind of shadow person that can do that can kill us in an instant.
But are they precluded from doing that? Like, they can mess with you, right? So they could close the door on you. They could do this. They could do that. But where's the boundary upon which they can act? I don't think they can run around here with impunity. I just don't think that.
I think they could cause a heart attack. People that are that encounter them, whatever, can cause so much dread and so much, depression, whatever. It could cause a heart attack. One of the guys that I knew from our lodge, who is not there anymore, he called me up and he says, I am in my living room and there's a shadow person standing in my living room right now. In the background, his wife was screaming on the top of her lungs. And he says, I don't know what to do. It's here and it doesn't want to go away. He goes, my kids are freaking out. They ran out of the room. And he says, they're hiding in their bedroom. He says, and I'm looking at this thing. He goes, what can I do? And I says, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know that much about them. And I says, they're very, very scary. And I said, I sympathize with you. As a result of that, the man sold his house and he moved.
Wow, that's really something.
Interesting. So, Karl, you mentioned earlier you went to Philadelphia and you experienced the 1700s, this disgusting cesspool, as you will. What other cities or places have you visited where you experienced something similar? Do you have any cool stories? Have you been, to historical sites where you could recount what happened there and see that?
Lower Manhattan. I see a lot of things there, but not terrifying. Philadelphia, it bothers me. Lower Manhattan, I could see the way people were, the way they walked around, the feel for the area. And it's sort of can make you a very knowledgeable person about a certain part of the city. And I find myself talking about things that I really should not know, but I do know. I went to Gettysburg. To give you an idea about this, I was asked to go to Gettysburg. And in Gettysburg, there's a building. It's called the Jenny Wade House. Jenny Wade was the only civilian who died in the Battle of Gettysburg. She had a house that was there. She refused to leave. And what happened is that a Confederate sharpshooter saw movement in the kitchen, and he shot through the door, and that's what killed her. That's the way the story goes. Now, Rosemary Guiley, who's very famous, and she did a lot of things in Gettysburg. They asked her to. She asked if she could bring me to the Jenny Wade House to take a look around. So, the warden said, "Okay." He says, "Go there before the people go there, and have him take a look around." So here I was in the Jenny Wade House in Gettysburg with Rosemary Guiley, and given permission by the warden to go there and inspect the house. So I walked through the house and through between psychometry and retrocognition, I'm going through the house. And it's for about 45 minutes, I'm going through this entire house. And then I walked up to her and I said, "Everything is wrong." She says, "Well, what do you mean?" I says, "The bed was facing in a different direction." And I showed how the direction was. "The wallpaper that they have here that's supposed to be original is wrong." And I says, "There was more flowers in the original." And I says, "This color is wrong. It was more blue than green." And then I started walking through the first floor, pointing out things that were wrong. I said, "This supposed table is replacement. The original table did not look like this." So I go through the whole thing, and I went up on the second floor, and I'm telling them that everything that is wrong about this place. So she goes, "Okay." And she looked at me kind of, strangely, because they advertised that this is this is the way the house was and the furniture and everything else. So the ranger comes by, and he has the sunglasses on, the mirror sunglasses, with the smoking the bear hat.
Ranger Will and Holly. Right.
Yes. So he walks in there, and she said, "Well," she says, he's really good at what he does. He says, "But he says there's some things that are wrong."
He's making us look bad.
And so,
False advertising.
And so she goes, for example, he says, and she said, with the bed and the wallpaper and the table, and he's going through all that. And this guy is just, remember, it's the sunglasses that have the mirrors on them.
Yep.
And he's just staring at her. And occasionally he turns his head, he looks at me, and he turns back to her. And she's going through all this. And she goes, "What do you make of all this?" So for about 5 seconds, he doesn't say a word. Then he looks at Rosemary Guiley and he says, "Everything he said was true."
Wow.
She goes, "But why do you have everything different?" He goes, "We had to do this. We had to put in central air, and we couldn't do it the way it was before. We had to change everything so it could accommodate central air."
Of course.
So then
Modern
he looks at me
conveniences.
and he says to me, he goes, "And you saw all that?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Would you be willing to go with me and another ranger tonight? We'll take you someplace that visitors never go." And he goes, "And there's nothing written about this place, and you could tell me what's there." So I did, "Sure, let's do it." So it was Rosemary, it was me, my wife, and the two rangers. One was the other ranger was a female. And he takes us in his truck, and we go to some godforsaken place. There's no lights anywhere, and we're going down these dark roads, 2-lane highways. And then he pulls into this lot, and it has a tiny little road that goes around it. And he goes, "Tell me what was here." I said, "You got to let me out of the truck." I said, "Stay about 50 feet behind me, and slowly as I'm walking, just be behind me, and I'm walking around. So here I am. I have all these people in the truck, and I'm walking in front of this big truck around Gettysburg, where I don't know this place. And all I could hear is the sound that horses make, that sound that they make. And I could smell the horses, and I could hear their hoofs going up and down, a lot of horses. And I'm thinking, maybe it was a farmer or something that had this, maybe it's this a farmer's horses or something. So I walked up to the truck, and I felt really, really bad because, it's just weird stuff that I saw and heard. And so I said to the rangers, I said, look, I don't know exactly what was here, but all I could tell you is there's a tremendous amount of horses here. I hear them. I could see them. I says, all I see is a bunch of horses. So he looks down at me. By this time, he's not wearing the sunglasses. And he looks down at me and he goes, this was the area for the Union cavalry. They stored all their horses here.
Wow.
Wow.
Do you know Brother Don Scar by any means?
No, I don't believe so.
He's a past master, and he just got up to Right Worshipful under Gene now that he's Grand Master. But he was a past master of Milltown Palestine Lodge, and he is an active and avid reenactor. He's out at Gettysburg all the time, reenacting Union battles and all that kind of cool stuff. In fact, we did a small movie called Bucktail Brigade out there in Gettysburg with some friends, a short film, and he was integrated into the poster for it, which is kind of cool. But I just figured, I don't know if you spent any additional time out there, but you may have run into him or Ray Helge, who does more Revolutionary War reenactments. But I wanted to ask on this. So this idea of seeing the past, how far have you tested how far you can go in terms of back in time? That, like, can you find the Tomb of Alexander, or do you know where the Ark of the Covenant is, or anything like that?
I'm not saying. I wanted to know how far back I could see.
Right.
The United States is too young. It's only a few hundred years old. Since we became a nation. So I decided to go to England.
Okay.
To go to where they're at, because their stuff dates back thousands of years. And I'm not going to go to the Tower of London, all that poo. I'm not going to be bothered with that. I want to go.
That's still newer, right?
Right. Yeah,
and,
of course.
And also, it's like, no matter what I say, it's been written about already. So, and of course, they could say, well, you read this in a book.
Right.
So that's not going to do me any good.
Right.
So what I did is I have friends in England, and I told them what I wanted to do. I says, I have to go back to see how far back I can go. So they took me to the Rollright Stones that dates back to the days of the Romans when they were occupying England.
Okay.
So they took me there, and they said, well, this is an area that dates back 5,000 years. So I went there, and I could not get clarity. I saw blurs. Mm-hmm. And they're like, I see blurs. I can't really see much about them. And I said, but I could see them, but I can't. It seems like I can't go back over 5,000 years. So my retrocognition will go back thousands, but I do have a limit, and 5,000 seems to be it. And then recently, when I was doing research for my next book, my third book, we went back there because I was doing a book on time slips, and they said that time slips happen at this particular area. So I went there, and as I'm standing looking around, they said that the National Trust, they're the ones that take care of all this, their state parks and everything. And they said that they're going to be doing work. They're going to clear out places where they believe the villages were. And so I was walking with my host, and I looked at the whole ground, and I said, if you really want to know where they lived, and I turned around, I started walking through the woods, and I pointed down at the ground. I says, this is where they were hanging around. And he put a big smile on his face. He goes, "This is the scheduled area that they were going to put the research in. This is where they said the villages were." Just what you said.
So
for the benefit of our viewers, can you explain a time slip?
yes,
What
good
you're
question.
referring to there?
Yeah, I was just going to ask that
Okay.
same thing.
A time slip is a real phenomena where a person, anybody, could be somewhere and all of a sudden everything around them changes and it goes back in time. It could go back 50 years or it could go back 300 years. And you could be there for anywhere from 10 seconds to a full 4 minutes. And then you snap back, you come back. Now, I know it sounds crazy, and how could that be true? Well, yeah, that's, what people always said, except what's been happening is that lately, people who have credibility have reported this. They cannot just shrug it off anymore. They can't say this is ridiculous, it doesn't happen. Now, they found out that a place where this happens most often is in Liverpool, England, on a street called Bold Street, that's B-O-L-D, that this has happened there a number of times. So when I was doing my research for my book, I hopped on a plane and we went to Bold Street in Liverpool.
Okay.
I wanted to see what this place was like. And so I went there and, of course, I didn't see anything, but I wanted to go to the place where this was happening. And if you watch, like In Search Of with Zachary Quinto, he did a show on it, and he's talking about time slips. And he says, and then the minute he's talking about it, he goes, "We have to go to Liverpool to Bold Street." And so he starts talking about it. And so that's what a time slip is. And people never took it seriously. They just took it as, people, they were dreaming about this and all that. And it can't be true until too many people, in this one particular case in 1998, a former policeman had a time slip. And when he went into the time slip, he met somebody who's having the same time slip. And a bookstore turned out to be a big department store that dated back to like 1949, 1950. So not only was he there, he had somebody with him that was experiencing the same thing. And then he snapped back. And now the Liverpool police couldn't take this as, fantasy land, because it's one of their policemen who's trained to be an observer. And it wasn't just one guy. It happened to be two. And so now they're taking it seriously. Now they're talking more and more about it. And you're going to be hearing more and more about it. And my book sort of like gives you a common sense approach to it about, what a time slip is. It talks about my time slip that I had and some of the people that I interviewed, but I didn't make the whole book about interviews because I felt it'd be for the reader, it'd be sort of like aggravating after a time because you're reading about this person and that person and this person, that person, and you're going to say, well, it never happened to me. Am I going to experience it? I'm telling you, most likely not. But there are people out there who will experience it.
So I could actually attest to that. I had an experience right here in Morristown, Tempewick. It was actually in Jockey Hollow on Tempewick Road. We were hiking one day in the woods, and I was with another friend. We were both transported, what I would describe back to Revolutionary War times. You could see the horses, see the soldiers that were camping, walking around. And it lasted probably about, I would say, 1.5 to 2 minutes.
Right.
It was highly unusual. I mean, that's not something I would normally ever see. The other person experienced the same exact thing. Saw all the sights, smells. You could just, I was back in that moment. And it was the summer. And when we were transported back, it was really cold.
Right.
So I actually had the chills. I felt cold. It was just like, oh, man, what the hell just happened? So I guess that would be a time slip then.
You got it. That's a time slip. And in my own theory, which I cannot validate, I can't say this is true. it's only my opinion about this. I believe that everybody who's listening to this this broadcast is living through time slips constantly, every single day. The thing is, when you drive around and you look around at different buildings and you could visualize what it was like before, see, I don't believe that what you're looking at is just an imagination of what it could have looked like. I believe you're actually seeing it. And the reason I say that is because years ago, back in the 1970s, they had subliminal messages that the movies would put in.
Mm-hmm.
They would put in a picture of a hot dog or a big Coca-Cola, an ice cold Coca-Cola. And they would put these in there into the movie. They would show the movie, and at intermission, the people would go out and buy a tremendous amount of hot dogs, Coca-Cola, but they never saw it. It was there, and the sales went up dramatically. And it would be like candy, or wherever they're trying to sell, they would put these little images in there, which, believe me, when they were showing the movie, you could not see. It went by your face.
Yeah, so subliminal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah.
But
Subliminal messaging.
Now it's illegal.
Well,
You can't do that anymore.
yeah, if you see Fight Club, they see how many pictures of male body parts they could put in a movie without people noticing, and yet what effect it would have on them, kind of thing.
Right.
Tell me this, Karl, though. You've traveled around the world, obviously, not only for your books, but, to travel on your own. What other famous sites have you been to? Have you been to the pyramids? Have you been to Chichen Itza, Stonehenge? I mean, what other older stuff have you seen and tried to visualize?
I've been to Stonehenge, and everything that they tell you how it was built is incorrect.
Okay.
I knew how they built it, and before I even went to England,
Mm-hmm.
and I told my wife about it, and I told my hosts that were in England about what to expect, and I said that I hear a high frequency pitch sound that when they were moving the stones around. I said they were levitating stones. Now, how they were doing it, they had help. And if we're talking about UFOs, let's say UFOs.
Who's doing the helping, Karl?
Yeah.
Well,
Who's the help?
the thing is that people don't realize is what you see above ground in the Stonehenge, it's equal underground.
Okay.
Each stone weighs, like 80 tons or more.
Mm-hmm.
This is pre the wheel. This is before they had the wheel. The quarry that they got it from was over 200 miles away.
Right.
And he had to cross over water to get that stone to Stonehenge, the location. Now, the only way they could do it was probably drag it or put beams down or logs and roll it on logs to get it around. And the way I see it is you would need a tremendous amount of people. We're talking scores of people who would have to make rope. Because remember, you can't go to the store and buy rope.
Right.
You have to make
rope. Usually hemp or something else out of it. Yeah.
And so you would have to make hemp, put it around this stone, find logs, which, by the way, there are not like logs there. It's not trees like the United States. You have to really hunt to find trees. And you have to drag them over this thing if that's the way you did it. And to drag them over 200 miles from that quarry and bring them to the location of Stonehenge, that would mean it would take probably easily a half a year to bring one stone over. Now, can you imagine a guy with his wife there or a significant other, and after 6 months or 8 months, he walks into this little hut and he says, "Hi, hon. Boy, we had a rough time. And guess what? We're leaving tomorrow. We got another stone to pick up." It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous that you could expect these people to do that. Not to mention go into the quarry and get these stones out of the quarry, down to the ground, chop them up, whatever, and then move them. And they have a museum that's right there on site. And they show that they shaped the stones by using crude chisels and rocks as hammers.
Nonsense.
It's like, are you kidding me? And they showed like brass. Let me tell you something. I don't know if you're familiar with working with brass. It's kind of a very soft material.
Yeah.
Go up to a nice boulder and just start smashing this thing to see if you could cut it. Go ahead, do it. It would take you forever to do it. And now another thing is, how are you going to straighten this thing out?
Right.
They said, well, you could dig a hole and you push it into the hole. And
With water, they said that it sort of displaces the water as it goes in and like all that kind of thing. Can you, because obviously since you experienced the I don't want to say the vibration, although it fits, vibration frequency of that time that moved the stones, you heard it, right? I mean, you clearly experienced it on some level. Yeah. Were you able to differentiate on some level what specific vibratory frequency it was being used?
I couldn't do that. I know the high shrill sound that was going on. And when I was now you got to remember something about Stonehenge. Right. They don't have lights in the ground that shine on this thing at night. They don't have that. Mm-hmm. It remains dark all the time. There is no electricity anywhere around it. When I was with my host there, and I was telling him before we even got to Stonehenge about the high-pitched shrilling sound, and I could see things being moved. And I said there was a lot of high-power electricity going through the area. And so, after I relieved myself and told him all this stuff, there's a path that walks around Stonehenge. There's a spot that has a bridge on it. There's a little brook that, I guess if it rains a lot, the water goes underneath this little indentation in the ground. So you can walk over this aluminum bridge. So he knew what I was saying about the electricity that was generated by this thing. So he's walking behind me. I walked across the bridge. He's behind me, and there's all these tourists that are there. He takes his hands and he touches the railing. The sound of the electric shock that went through that railing was so loud that it stopped everybody in their tracks, anywhere around Stonehenge, and they stopped to stare. What was that sound of electric that went through this guy's arms? Mm-hmm. And I looked at him and said, "Are you okay?" And he goes, that was the biggest shock I ever got in my life. And remember, there is no electricity. I was wondering if there was any wires that was going under the ground. Mm-hmm. Nothing like that.
So is this one of those piezoelectric things where the consistency of the rocks does it have a lot of quartz in it? Or,
I don't know. Mm-hmm. I really don't know, because you can't walk up to the rocks. They don't allow you to.
They don't?
No, you can't walk up to the rocks and touch them. You can't do that. I wanted to know that, but, they're not going to let you do it. But the thing is, what shocked me.
I wonder if our buddy Tim Hogan could get us there. He can get us into the Great Pyramid, so maybe he can get us into the Stonehenge.
I don't know, but just bear with me.
Sure.
Sure.
So anyway, the whole point of the matter is that it's sort of like gave me the okay, saying that what you're saying about the electric, about this high power shrill and moving these stones is accurate. That's how they move them around. And I challenge anybody to tell me, how can you get people who have not advanced to the wheel to move these enormous pieces of rock across water? How do they get across the water? Do they build a ship to move them across the water? It's like a river. How did they do that?
So what did they use Stonehenge for? Were you able to see that?
No, just I wasn't quite sure. I think there was a number of uses for it. I believe, and this is strictly me, that Stonehenge was a landing area for aircraft.
Wow.
It's built like a circle. It's off the ground. Oh, I don't know if you know this or not. People don't know this about Stonehenge, but at the top of every rock, it's a cutout like a Lego, that the stones that lay on top, they fit into it.
Mm-hmm.
They plug into it. So if you look at the top of Stonehenge, it's a flat piece of ground with these rocks underneath it. And that's why I believe that this thing was built so that aircraft could land on top of it. And if there's any kind of exhaust or kind of pushing out any kind of energy, it would have to be above ground. You know, if you notice that with the United States, when we are shooting off a rocket, whatever, if you watch, you see all the smoke and everything go sideways underneath. That's because there's tunnels underneath. If they didn't have the tunnels to take away all that heat and everything, it would burn up the rocket.
Right.
So when it takes off, all the stuff blows underneath it. It goes through the tunnels out to the side, and then it's able to take off because it's not going to burn itself off. And the rocket uses approximately, if I remember correctly, 22,000 gallons per second. That's how much fuel it takes. You look at a spaceship ready to take off, only the top has the magic stuff in the astronauts and the computers. Everything else is nothing but fuel.
Right.
Yeah, propeller.
Now, if you have a aircraft, a spaceship of some kind, and you have to land and take off again, you're going to need some place that you could land, that when you take off, and if there's any kind of fumes or fire or anything else, it's going to have to be extended to the bottom. It can't be underneath it, or it's going to burn it up.
That's pretty cool stuff. Have you ever seen any aliens, or personally interacted with them, or seen them, or?
I saw a UFO back when I was a kid, and we're talking the late 1950s. And we were traveling northbound on Route 115, going through Pennsylvania on our way to Wilkes-Barre. And as we were going through there, my father, I remember I was a tiny little kid, and my father kept on looking up in the sky through the windshield of our 1955 Pontiac. And he's looking through the windshield, and he's just driving. Then he pulls over to the side, and it's totally desolate, no lights or anything. And he says, "Everybody get out." And he points his finger up at the sky. He says, "Look at that. This thing is moving back and forth." And so here I'm looking at this thing that's going back and forth, and then all of a sudden it just sort of like takes off and disappears. That was the first time I ever saw a UFO that really was in the front of my face watching this. As for actual interacting with aliens, whatever, I don't know. Because with the people that like Ingo and people that I've known, their thing was they're hybrids. They look a lot like humans, and you may actually be interacting with them and you wouldn't even know it. So I could have, but
I often feel this way about Dave. I'm not quite sure if he is an alien or not, but I have my doubts. No, I'm joking. But not really.
Definitely not an intelligent species.
No. What do you know about stuff like that's a little bit more metaphysical, like Merkabas? Are you familiar with Merkabas as a concept or that kind of thing?
Nothing about that.
Okay. Because, some of the people have said that, for instance, the Greys used certain things about certain spacecrafts based on Merkabas and other things to come here. I was just curious if you now were you influenced at all in the way that you do your readings and such by anyone previously? Were you taught at any point outside of, I know you said that you didn't want to have anything that influenced your talents, right? So that they would change things around. So, but at all, did you have any outside input that you have decided would be helpful or that you started to get into?
Yes. Ingo Swan.
Oh, Ingo. So Ingo was one that helped. Okay.
Yes, he did. And he explained a lot of things that I was seeing. But like I said, a lot of this stuff will take a long time to explain to you about the strange things that he was able to teach me. And I recall Paula Roberts, sitting next to me when we were going through this, and it shocked her what we were going through and what we were able to do. And, we would walk around, he was near the Bowery, that's where he lived. And we would walk around the Bowery and he would ask me questions or ask me if I felt certain things as we were walking down the street. And he was really way better than I could ever be. And we would talk about things. And he finally said that there's stuff that I can do that he can't.
Like what?
He had a 4-story building with lofts in it. He used to rent out the lofts. And he goes, the people on the one floor, he says, I can't get them to stay there any length of time. They're there, they feel uncomfortable, and they leave. And he said, can you go there and tell me why they're leaving this place? And I said, okay, I'll go up. So I went there with Paula Roberts, and we went up there. I looked around, and I saw the way it was in 1880, the way it was built. And then I came downstairs and I said, the area that the bathroom is now was not there when the building was built. The bathroom was at the top of the stairs, and all it was a toilet. And it says they had a very crude looking sink. That was the bathroom. And I said that a man died in the bathroom. And I said, all the kids in the neighborhood with the policemen went up there to remove the body. And I says, that's one of the things that happened in this particular apartment. I said that was really shook everybody up, the guy's death and everything. So Ingo, he went out of the room, he came back with a blueprint of the building from, I think, 1882. And so at his table, he opened it up, and then he takes his finger and he goes up the stairs. And at the top of the stairs was the bathroom. He goes, you're right about the bathroom. Now the bathroom is placed more inside. And so we were, we were doing all that, and it worked out really well. I says, you have a problem there with the commotion that took place in this loft. And I says, that residual may still be there. And I think the biggest thing with Ingo and me was I got a phone call after 9/11. And Ingo said to me, he goes, I want you to come see me right away. And I said, I can't because you live outside the Holland Tunnel, and I can't get through the Holland Tunnel because they have armed policemen there and they won't let anybody through.
Right.
So I can imagine him smoking his little cigar, and he goes, get in your truck, drive over to the tunnel. And he says, and when they stop you, tell them that you're allowed to go through and give them my name. I said, they carry like M16s. I says, I don't want to be killed there. He goes, just go there, mention my name, and he says, they'll let you through. All right, so I go there and I says, I'm scared of this. They're just waiting for a terrorist, and here I am in a truck. So I drive up to the mouth of the Holland Tunnel, and this soldier comes over, and with a helmet on, and he with a clipboard, and he goes, "You're not allowed in the tunnel." I said, "I have permission to go through." And he says, "What permission?" I said, "Ingo Swan." He goes, "Wait right here. So they're like, oh my God, what did I do? So he comes back and he says, you can go through, but only escorted. And so here this motorcycle cop comes by, and I'm following this cop through the tunnel. And you know, the thought that went through my head is, this is all happening to me, and I don't have a friend or anybody who can verify this, that this is actually happening to me. So I went through the tunnel, and I got to Ingo's place, and he says to me, follow me. We went down to his basement, and he rolls out a map of Afghanistan. He goes, where's bin Laden? If you ever saw a map of Afghanistan, it's a white sheet of paper with a couple squiggles on it. So I said, are you kidding me? I said, I couldn't tell you anything about this map. It's a white sheet of paper with some squiggles on it. I said, I can't tell you about this. And then I looked at him and I said, Flahamabad. He goes, what's that?
Plahamabad?
Said, no. Flahamabad.
Oh, Lahamabad. Okay.
And he goes, is it a town? Or I says, I don't know. It's important though. So he goes, okay, follow me. We went down the Bowery to every single store that had any Middle Eastern person that was around.
Okay.
I could ask. He kept saying, tell him. And I said, Flahamabad. Nobody seemed to know what it was. So he goes, okay. So we went back, and I felt terrible because he expected me to do something and I couldn't do it. But, you know, he says, okay, he says, you could go back. They're waiting for you. You could go back through the tunnel. So they waited for me, and I went through the tunnel, and that was it. I figured that's the end of the story. Well, we have an alarm clock that wakes us up in the morning, and the news comes on. It's like old news all the time. So I'm sleeping in bed. The alarm clock goes off. The radio comes on, and it says, American troops went into Flahamabad, and they captured a cache of computers, weapons, computers, you know, all this. And it was a treasure trove, all this stuff that they found. So, and I'm half groggy, and I says, wait a minute. Didn't you say Flahamabad?
Bye.
So my wife goes, I'm not sure. So let's listen to it. And then about a half hour later, they repeated the story. And they talked about Flahamabad. So I got, you know, that they captured all these weapons and everything. It was like amazing what they got. Two-way radios, everything. Cell phones. So what I did is I called up Ingo. He answers the phone. And I said, tell me something. Is what I told you yesterday that have anything to do with those troops going to Flahamabad? He goes, well, what do you think? I said, that's why I'm calling you. I don't know. He goes, well, just keep thinking. And he hangs up the phone. Click.
Wow.
So
Is
he was right.
Ingo passed away now?
Yes, he has.
Has he come to you after he's passed away?
No.
No. Okay.
No, that's the people I wanted for him to come to see me. He hasn't. He hasn't come back to Paula Roberts, to no one.
Now,
So
do you
it's
know a
very
guy
sad.
named David Hawkins by any means? David E. Hawkins. He was a psychiatrist. He passed away in about 2012.
No.
Okay.
I don't know.
So you know, I have an acquaintance, Mary Ennis. She's out of Vermont. She's a channel. She channels a being named Elias. I'm not sure. Have you ever worked with channels or anything like that, or no, nothing like that? Okay.
I stay away from that. Yeah.
You stay away from that. Okay, how come?
Because first of all, I have no interest in it.
Okay, fair enough.
And, you know, to me, it's like if I'm supposed to meet somebody or, you know, have them see me, it's a one-on-one.
Got it.
You know, if you go to somebody and they could say, you say, I want to meet my dead Uncle Dave. And they say, for $200, we're going to meet Dave. Do the Michael Jackson moonwalk, go backwards out the door and keep running. Nobody could do that. Nobody can. You can't pinpoint somebody who passed away and say, "Oh yeah, I could contact them." That's false.
I see.
Nobody could do that.
So how do people come through from a medium perspective? In other words, who comes through? How does it work? Do they take
If
over
they
your
choose-
body and speak through you, or how does it go?
No, for at least I'm speaking for myself. That they come and then I see them and then they. Actually, I never saw them move their mouths. It's sort of like telepathy.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I know what they're saying. I know what they're thinking, and that's the way it goes.
So
And it's like,
so does
then I could-
Kreskin. Right. He just passed away recently. He was a neighbor of mine just in the next town over, actually. You ever meet him?
No, but I know about
Yeah.
him, and I know people who had encounters with him.
Sure.
And but you have good thoughts of Kreskin? Let's see.
I don't know. I know he was a showman, right? So, as far as that goes, he was an engaging guy. I used to see him around the neighborhood. He liked to feed the deer and stuff like that. He was always out for a cup of coffee. Very jovial guy. As far as his accuracy, I really have no idea.
Okay. But no, I personally never met him.
Mm-hmm.
I know of him, but through other people.
Sure.
But when it comes you have to understand, I don't go out of my way to be a medium.
Sure.
What happens, it happens, and that's about it. Other than that, it's like I just go about my life. I don't, people think, well, this is what you do. This is not what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I have careers and everything and other interests. It just so happens that I could do this stuff. And, when like the CIA or FBI or whatever, they come to me usually unofficially and they ask. And if you were to say that they came to see me to do this or that, they would deny it. They don't want people to know that. It's like when you hear people say that the police department contacts me all the time, so psychically I could tell them about this or that. That's false. Police departments do not go to psychics. They don't ask them anything. If there is, I never heard of it. The problem of that is the police say if people found out that we're going to you and you were giving us information to capture somebody, the taxpayer is going to say, why are we paying a police department? We just hired this guy. He'll tell us how to find everybody.
Right.
So they want that controversy, so they never do it.
Well, not
But
to mention they
if
need to establish, and I'm speaking as an attorney now, they need to establish custody of a gun or something like that. And they can't just say, well, the psychic told us where the gun was. I mean, it was kind of,
Right.
That's a tough one to establish chain of custody and other things like that. So that's a tough one.
Sure. Now, I worked in law for over 35 years.
Uh-huh.
So because I did forensic videography and photos. I
Interesting.
worked with everybody.
Got it.
And there's one of the largest law firms in the state that knew about me, would use me, but would never say it. He would ask me to do some ridiculous videotaping or photography that had very little to do with the case. And then we would go to court. And I would sit next to him, and he says, tell me who I should get rid of on the jury. And I would tell him.
Now, that's a good skill to have, right? So you make some money that way.
Because when they were announcing, about the case or whatever, I would look at the people. I knew what they were thinking.
Got it.
So then I would tell him. And sometimes when he was doing depositions of different people, and I would, I'll give you an example. Some woman got her hand that was mutilated from a press. When they make objects with a press, they have on their hands, they have two rings and wires or strings. And they put the item into the machine, they remove their hands, and they pull down on it. And then the machine will come down and press it.
Right.
So now, because the reason for that is that you know that your hands are away from the machine. So you keep swinging your arms around, and it brings this thing down and makes the piece. Like, for example, it could be oil filters. The top of an oil filter is is pressed in by these huge machines.
Sure.
So you put the piece of metal in there, and then you take your arms and you swing them down, and then it pops out this piece. Now, a lot of these people work on by the number of pieces that they make. That's how they get paid.
Got it.
So a lot of these people will take the 2 rings and put them on one arm, and they feed it with their right arm or left arm, whatever, and they put it there, smash it, pull it out, put another one in, smash it, because it's quicker to do it like that. You're constantly feeding it, and they produce a lot more product by doing that, by putting 2 rings on one arm. So this woman did that, and she got hurt. And so I was there to videotape, the deposition, what was going on. And so he's looking at me like, she's saying that, well, she did this, she did that, blah, 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 blah. And so I looked at her, and she spoke with a Jersey City accent. Very distinctive Jersey City accent. So she's talking like that. And then I looked at the attorney, and I just whispered in his ear. I said, find out her status as a citizen. I said, she wasn't born in this country. And he looked at me because her Jersey City accent was so thick you could cut it with a knife. And he goes, what? I says, find out her immigration status. So her boss was sitting at the next table listening to this deposition. And so he asked a few more questions. And he said, can you tell us your immigration status? And then she looked up and she said, I'm here illegally. I heard a thud. Her boss's head hit the table. Because who would ever think that a woman like this was here illegally? But this is the kind of stuff that he used to have me go out and do these tapings or photography or whatever, just so he could ask me questions, but he would never, ever bring up the fact about the paranormal abilities. Because he could never go back to his law firm and say, we're hiring this guy so you can tell me something. Like, he wouldn't do it. And by the way, as long as I was on one of his cases, he never lost the case. Never.
Wow.
I'm surprised he doesn't use you for every one of his cases.
Yeah.
Well, I left the legal field.
Oh, I see.
And he was like shocked that I would do that. And I left. And I guess since I'm not doing my old job, he can't hire me anymore. I have to do that.
No, I suppose. Tell me, is there? What do you see for future projects for yourself, and what do you think your legacy is in terms of your ability and what you were able to contribute to the world?
I don't know. I really don't, because it's circumstances that come my way. People who need me, I will help them if I believe it's the right thing to do. I'm not on call all the time, except for people that I respect. There are different people in the state of New Jersey who may ask me for things, and I will do it for them. But other than that, when somebody just calls me up on the phone, I doubt if I'll just run out and do something. Because, number one, it's not appreciated. It was said to me once by somebody who charges, nobody respects free. If you pay a lot of money for it, no matter what you tell them, they're very happy. They believe you. If you do something and you don't charge, they think what you're telling them is not true. It can't be true because it's free. And I find that to be very true.
Yeah, they could overlook that, I suppose. Dave, you have any other questions?
Absolutely.
I know you do.
So, from your remote viewing perspective, have you ever delved into some fun places, like going out to, say, the dark side of the moon or Mars or anywhere in the universe?
Yes, I have.
Oh, what's on the dark side of the moon, Karl?
Are you able to speak about it is another question.
I rather not.
Oh, can you give us a hint at least?
We're not the only ones that are on the moon.
Oh.
Right. And
Yeah, because
it was brought up to me about things that were happening on the moon. I was shocked. and then I did some remote viewing, and it's like, oh my God. Engel did it and got so scared that actually there's part of his documentary about him that when he remote viewed the moon, which was asked by the United States government for him to do it, and he did it. And I don't know if you ever caught that, but he got terrified what he saw, and he didn't really want to do that anymore. And so I did it. I remote viewed the moon.
Sure.
And I rather not get into that.
Understood. What about Antarctica or somewhere like that?
Oh,
sorry, Alex.
Well, they're discovering a lot of that stuff now. That has been up there. Especially, we're having visitors that are coming that are using that area for staging. And the thing is about when you talk about UFOs. The minute you mention that, people automatically figure, oh, there's something wrong with you. There's no such things and all that. And it's like, get real, my friend. These things are real. And the government finally is coming out and they're talking about it. And the Vatican knew about it for so many hundreds of years that this stuff was going on. And they released a lot of their records. Countries like Mexico has released their records, and Russia, or I should say the Soviet Union did. And so people are releasing the records and about all this mysterious type of stuff that's going on. And if you want to sit at your home and say, this is ridiculous, it's not true, well, there's a lot of people you got to convince in our government, other countries, and like the Vatican and all that about what's going on.
What?
Yeah, we're definitely not alone.
Do you have you ever worked for the Vatican? Have they ever employed you, or
I can't tell you all the people I worked with.
Oh, okay,
I can't do that.
Okay, fair enough. Let's ask this: in your understanding, or if you've been around, not you specifically, but has the Vatican worked with folks like yourself for various purposes?
Through intermediaries. It won't be the Vatican. It will be a bishop or cardinal or one of these people.
And what type of subject matter would typically be something that they would use people like you for?
That I couldn't tell you.
Okay. That's great stuff, man. So what do you see as the future of humanity? Do you see in terms of more people having psychic gifts in the future, or yes. So that's something that's starting to expand now.
Yeah, if you sit around and all you keep saying is, I don't believe it, nothing's going to happen.
Right.
You're going to leave yourself open and listen and think about these things. And really, when people are talking about like time slips, don't be so quick to say, I don't believe it. Listen to what they have to say. They've experienced something here. I know other people who have, and the credibility is they're great people. The same thing with UFOs. There are people out there, policemen, lawyers, all these people have seen, or presidents have seen things like that. And they're talking about it's a real thing. And yet people, they're like, if I don't see it, then it doesn't exist. And if I do see it, maybe it's something I ate. That's why I'm having these hallucinations. That's the way people are. So for a person like me, if I have a conversation in general public, I got to keep my mouth shut.
Sure.
Because people they make fun of it. They say, oh, green men and blah, blah, blah. And I think they're really being funny, probably because they're nervous about it. And it's frustrating. You have to understand it's like how, and I saw this with Ingo. He was giving an explanation of how aliens get into our world, how they're able to do this. And I'm there with, he had a bunch of professors from different universities. I don't know what universities, I don't know these people. All I know is they were there at this place. And he had a blackboard. He was drawing on this blackboard the mountain ranges, whatever, and how they were sneaking right in without being detected by radar. And he was showing all this. And if I'm lying, I'm dying. This idiot came into the room. He looked at Ingo with all of us standing there, and he goes, "Oh, you're not talking about those stupid UFOs again, are you?" So
Wow.
Ingo he took his hand, he wiped off what he did on the blackboard. He goes, "We could all leave now." I never got to hear what he wanted to tell everybody because of an idiot that walked into the room.
That's it's
So
a
do you
sad
think-
state of affairs sometimes. People being so ignorant.
Do you think they're interdimensional beings
Yes.
versus? Yeah.
You know, if you want interdimensional beings, look to Bigfoot.
Sure.
You know, Bigfoot, you see him walking through the snow, and you see his footprints, and all of a sudden they disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote in my last book about the Bigfoot that I was asked to investigate. And I went to this ground that was flipping my compass, was spinning my compass being there. And she told me that this Bigfoot was coming on her property and tore her electric lights right out of the wall,
Wow.
just out by the roots. And then I looked on the ground and I could see Bigfoot footprints. And what I wrote about is what I call it the zone of silence.
Okay.
She was walking her dog, and she was calling her dog, and all of a sudden, she couldn't hear the dog walking in the leaves. It stopped. And she realized that she heard nothing. There was nothing. And so she's yelling and yelling. She couldn't hear her voice in this zone. She was screaming, and there's no sound coming out of her mouth. So she thought that her dog is going to get killed, probably by Bigfoot or something. And she kept on screaming, whatever. And as she started to back away from this zone, and then as she walked out, she could hear the dog walking through the leaves again. And there it was. So I said that I wanted to go to this area to check on it myself. So I went to this ground that she pointed out. And here I go, walking into it with my compass. And I walked in there and I heard total silence. No sounds, no wind, no sound at all. And here I am on this ground, and I'm getting creeped out. You know what it's like to go into a complete room? There's no sound at all.
Are you tapping
really
into
scary.
what was in the past at that time, or is it still present now?
I'm talking about right now. It's there right now.
Oh, okay.
It's there right now.
Yeah, this place exists. And, Mark Turgraff. You know Mark?
Of course.
Turgraff? Okay.
Absolutely.
Mark Turgraff, I called him to this place and I said, check this out. So he comes down to this place and I point to the ground and you see Bigfoot footprint right there. I said, what is it? He goes, it's a Bigfoot footprint right off the highway. He says, there you go. So Mark sees it. You know, Mark was with me for other things too. You know, he knows, like when his father passed away and wouldn't leave the property. And it's in the book. I wrote about that.
That's some fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
So was
he
that
wouldn't
in
leave.
Absent Witness then, you're saying?
No, this was
Or is that in something
second-
or somewhere the dead are singing?
You're right. And I
Yeah.
wrote about that.
Gotcha.
And everything is true. I mean, the thing is, Mark is there. And I wrote about it. And he never said, oh, this is all wrong. He was there. He saw it. And finally, I got a minister to come over to get rid of his, to get his father to move on. And he did. And I says, now when you go into the office where his father was habitating, I says, it's a totally different feel now. And Mark went into the room and because he knew the father would not leave. He goes, it place is so different now. It's like light. It's like it's not heavy anymore. So Mark has been with me on some of this stuff, where I've done investigations.
Let me ask you this, and I know that we want to wrap up because I'm sure you've got a bunch of other things you got to get to, but One of the things Eric Mattson, who was our first guest, told us that when they did the initial atomic explosions right before in the 40s, that disturbed some level of interdimensional travel or interdimensional beings. They then became aware of us, and we became some level of a threat to them in terms of what we were then capable of doing that we weren't capable of doing before. Have you ever interacted with that type of interdimensional being in terms of something else that that is out that way, or come across it at all, or know about it?
I don't believe I have, but see, if it's really done well, I wouldn't know if I did or didn't.
I suppose so.
Yeah.
Because they are so good. When, like I said, always going back to Ingo, because we are so close, about the things that he experienced, that he wrote in his book, Penetration, about interacting with aliens. And, and I'm reading that, and it's like, I heard someone else recently say the same thing that he said, except it was overseas.
Wow.
And when I said, "You think you're the first ones that experienced this alien thing?" I said, so I went to Penetration. I made pictures of the pages, and I said, "Read this. What you experienced in England is the same thing that Ingo experienced here."
That is pretty great. Carl, I really want to thank you for coming on the show today. This has really been absolutely amazing. And thank you. Thank you seriously as a brother and as a friend. And I hope we can maybe have you back if you have the time and interest to want to do another episode in the future sometime. And obviously we'd certainly love to meet Paula. Maybe we could talk offline about that. But as of right now, we're going to sign off. And this has been Brothers of the Arcana. As always, I am Alex Aldea.
I am Dave Ferrigno, and thank you so much, Carl, for joining us for this enlightening conversation.
Thank you so much.
Oh, it was great.
Take care. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.